I never thought I'd be the husband telling a story like this. My name is Jake, and I thought I had a solid marriage with my wife, Sarah. We had been together for 6 years, married for 3, and in my mind we were a team. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I believed we had built a foundation of trust and love. But then things began to change. It started subtly. Sarah, usually so engaged, became increasingly distant. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. She had recently been promoted, taking on more responsibilities at her job. I tried to be supportive, helping her with household chores and offering to listen to her vent about her day. But despite my efforts, I noticed her slipping away. She'd often come home late, citing meetings, and when she'd finally arrive, she'd be glued to her phone, scrolling through social media or texting. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that she was just busy. But something felt off. There was a shift in her demeanor, an edge of irritation that wasn't there before. One evening during dinner, I jokingly mentioned the concept of hall passes, that hypothetical scenario where married couples give each other permission for one night with someone else. Sarah laughed it off, but the laughter felt hollow, like she was hiding something. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. After all, we had a good life and a solid relationship. Right. Then came the day that changed everything. It started like any other Tuesday. I got off work early, excited to surprise her with her favorite dinner. As I walked into our home, the smell of something sweet tickled my nose, only it wasn't the dinner I had planned. I found her in the living room, but she wasn't alone. There was a man on our couch, laughing, an empty wine bottle beside them. My heart dropped as I froze in the doorway. "Jake!" Sarah exclaimed, her voice sharp and panicked. The man shot up, fumbling with his shirt. My mind raced, and I felt like I was watching a scene unfold in slow motion. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Oh my God, it's not what it looks like." She blurted out, but I wasn't buying it. The way she looked at me, her eyes wide with fear, told me everything I needed to know. The betrayal was real. In that moment, time seemed to halt. I was flooded with a cocktail of emotions: shock, anger, disbelief. I couldn't process what I was seeing. This was my wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone, and she was sitting there being completely unrepentant about her infidelity. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make her understand just how deeply she had hurt me, but I was paralyzed by the gravity of the situation. The stranger scrambled out of the house, leaving Sarah sitting on the couch, eyes darting between me and the door, panic etched on her face. "Please, let me explain," she pleaded. But what could she possibly say that would justify what I just witnessed? I felt my world crumbling around me. I had loved her deeply, and now I was faced with this stark reality. My heart, my trust, everything I held dear was at risk. "Explain what? How you've been lying to me? How you thought it was okay to cheat because of some stupid joke about hall passes?" Her excuses flowed like a river, filled with half-truths and desperate attempts to make me feel sorry for her, but I was beyond caring. I could see through her lies. I wasn't interested in her excuses. All I wanted was to understand how the woman I loved could betray me so easily. The confrontation spiraled into chaos. I felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. At that moment, standing in the rubble of our marriage, I realized I had a decision to make. I could either fight for what was left of us or walk away. But how could I ever trust her again? I took a deep breath, trying to quell the storm of emotions inside me. I needed time to think. Everything was changing, and I had to figure out my next move. In that silence, I made a decision that would echo through the coming days. Our marriage license felt like a mockery of everything we had built, so I tore it up. This isn't just about betrayal, it's about reclaiming my power. The days following that confrontation were a blur of confusion and pain. I moved to the guest room, leaving Sarah to wallow in the mess she had created. Sleep was elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, I was haunted by images of her laughing and cozying up to that man. I kept replaying the scene in my head, the shock on her face, the chaos of that moment, and the feeling of betrayal that now coursed through my veins like poison. When I went to work, I found it hard to focus. I would stare blankly at my computer screen, my mind racing with thoughts of her, the woman I had trusted, the woman I had planned a future with. I had always thought that trust was the bedrock of our relationship, and now that foundation had crumbled beneath me. My coworkers noticed my distraction, offering sympathy I didn't want. I wanted to scream, "I'm fine." But deep down, I knew I was anything but fine. Weeks passed, and I found myself in a weird limbo. Sarah continued to act as if life could go on as normal. She tried to reach out, sending me texts filled with apologies, but every time I looked at those messages, I felt a wave of disgust wash over me. How could she think that a simple "I'm sorry" could fix the wreckage she had caused? I started digging into her life more thoroughly. I went through her phone records, scrutinizing the numbers she called and the messages she sent. It felt invasive, but I needed to find out just how deep her betrayal ran. I found the number of the man I'd seen that day. His name was Mark. I did a quick online search and found out he worked at her office. Of course, they had been colleagues. It made perfect sense. I felt sick to my stomach just thinking about it. One night, after yet another failed attempt at discussing the situation with Sarah, I decided to confront her about Mark. I gathered all the evidence I could: texts, call logs, even her Instagram activity showing her regularly liking his posts. I wanted her to see the man she had become, the wife who had thrown away our love for a cheap thrill. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said firmly, my heart racing as I sat across from her at the kitchen table. She could sense the anger radiating off me, and for the first time she looked genuinely afraid. "What about?" she asked, trying to maintain a nonchalant demeanor, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. I laid out everything I had discovered: the calls, the texts, and the social media interactions. "You think I didn't see this? You thought I wouldn't dig deeper?" I was furious, and as I spoke, my voice escalated. "You've been lying to my face. How could you think this was okay?" Her face paled and she stammered for words. "Jake, no, you don't get to explain this away. I've seen the evidence. You've been cheating on me, Sarah. You let this guy into our home, into our life. How could you betray me like this?" It was like watching a deer in headlights. The realization of her own actions hit her hard, but instead of remorse, she tried to deflect. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was confused. I thought we could work through our issues. I thought you wouldn't notice." My heart sank hearing her excuses. Issues? What issues could possibly warrant cheating? You were the one who joked about hall passes, and now you've used one. You thought it was a joke, but you made it real. She looked down, her bravado crumbling. "I was feeling so overwhelmed. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I just wanted to feel something different, I guess." That was it. Her words cut deeper than any knife could. "So you chose to feel something different with another man. You didn't think of the consequences." She opened her mouth to reply, but I cut her off. "This isn't just about you feeling overwhelmed. It's about the trust you shattered. It's about the vow we made to each other." In that moment, I felt the weight of my anger collide with the deep sadness of what had happened. I realized I was standing at a crossroads. I could either choose to forgive her and attempt to rebuild, or walk away from a relationship that had turned into a lie. I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew I wouldn't let her manipulate me into feeling guilty for her choices. I stood up, feeling the heaviness in my heart. "I need time, Sarah. I can't just bury this and pretend it didn't happen. You've broken something that can't be easily fixed." With that, I walked away, leaving her behind. As much as I wanted to scream, shout, and demand answers, I also needed clarity. The emotional toll of this betrayal was becoming unbearable, and I had to figure out what I truly wanted. In that silence, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of determination. I was done being a victim in my own life. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I was in a haze, grappling with the reality of my situation. Sarah was still living in the house, but it felt like we were living in two separate worlds. I spent most of my time in the guest room, trying to create a boundary between us, and honestly, I felt like I was living in a prison of my own making. Each time I heard her move around, or each time she tried to talk to me, my blood boiled at the thought of her betrayal. I was consumed by thoughts of how she could do this to me. The nights dragged on, and all I could do was replay the moments leading up to the affair. I thought about how she had been distant, how she had changed. It felt like I was piecing together a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces, and I hated it. In my gut, I knew I needed answers, but the reality of confronting her again filled me with dread. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to confront Sarah again to make sense of this chaos. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. I marched into the living room where she was curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, probably looking at Mark's social media. The sight made my blood boil once more. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, the urgency in my voice making her flinch. She looked up, surprise and anxiety flashing across her face. "Jake," she started, seeming to anticipate the confrontation, but I cut her off. "No more excuses. I want to hear the truth. Why did you cheat? What was missing in our relationship that made you seek comfort in another man?" She sat back, her expression shifting from surprise to a defensive posture. "I told you I was feeling lost. You were working long hours and I felt neglected. It wasn't like I set out to hurt you, it just happened. Feeling neglected doesn't justify betrayal, Sarah. You could have talked to me. Instead, you made a choice. You chose to betray me, and now I'm questioning everything, the love, the commitment, the entire relationship," I said, the frustration spilling over. "I know I messed up, but She paused, searching for the right words, her voice trembling. "I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think it would go this far." It was infuriating to hear her brush off the gravity of her actions. "How could you not think? How could you let yourself get this far with someone else?" My voice was rising, but I struggled to keep my emotions in check. "You let him into our lives, our home, and for what? A few laughs." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a brief moment I considered the woman I had married, the woman I loved. But then I remembered the betrayal, the broken trust, and all the love I had poured into our marriage. "I want honesty, Sarah. I want you to be real with me. Did you love him?" I did. "Love him? It was just a fling. I was lonely and he gave me attention. It felt good to feel desired again," she exclaimed, her voice becoming frantic. Desire, was that what this was? My heart felt heavy as I processed her words. "So you traded our love for a cheap thrill? Is that what you're saying?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't interested in hearing more of her excuses. I was tired of the stories, sick of the manipulation. "I need some space. I can't keep going like this, pretending everything is okay while you're living in my house." For the first time, I saw a flicker of realization in her eyes. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Dead serious," I replied coldly. I was done with the games. I left the room, feeling a mix of anger and relief. I needed to clear my head to figure out what I wanted to do next. I spent the next few days in a daze trying to process my emotions. I reached out to my best friend, Mike, who had always been my sounding board. I needed someone to talk to who could offer a perspective that wasn't clouded by the emotional turmoil I was feeling. Over drinks that Friday night, I poured out everything to him. "I just can't believe she did this to me, Mike. I thought we were happy. I thought we were building something real." Mike nodded, listening intently. "Dude, people can be messed up. It's like they forget what they have until it's gone. But you have to think about you. What do you want?" I sighed heavily. "I don't know what I want. Part of me wants to fight for our marriage to see if we can salvage things. But the other part of me is so hurt and angry. Can I really trust her again?" Mike took a sip of his beer, contemplating my words. "Maybe you shouldn't rush into a decision. Give yourself some time to think. Do you want to try counseling? Or maybe just a trial separation?" Those words struck a chord. The idea of a separation felt like a way to reclaim my life, to take control of my future. "You know, that's not a bad idea. I need to put myself first for once. I've spent too long focusing on her feelings, and I need to figure out mine." Mike nodded, giving me a reassuring smile. "Exactly. You have to do what's best for you, man. You deserve to be happy." I left that night feeling slightly lighter, as if the weight of my pain had eased just a bit. I knew I had a difficult conversation ahead of me with Sarah, but I was becoming more resolute in my decision. I wasn't going to be a victim in my own life anymore. It was time to take charge. The next morning, I prepared for our conversation. I needed to be firm but fair. I owed it to myself to outline my boundaries and express my feelings clearly. Whatever came next would be up to her, but I was ready to take that leap of faith into the unknown. As I stood in front of the mirror that morning, I could feel the weight of the conversation ahead pressing down on me. I needed to approach Sarah with clarity and conviction. I was no longer the husband willing to overlook betrayal for the sake of a facade. I had to communicate my feelings firmly and ensure. She understood the gravity of her actions. When I walked into the living room, I found her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. The air was thick with unspoken words and emotional tension. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. She turned to me, her expression shifting from indifference to concern. "About what?" There was a hint of apprehension in her voice, as if she already knew what was coming. "I've been thinking a lot about us and what's happened. I've come to a decision." I paused, taking a deep breath. "I think it's best if we separate for a while. I need time to process everything, and I need to focus on myself and my own healing." "Separate?" she echoed, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Jake, please, I know I messed up, but we can work through this. I don't want to lose you." "Sarah, you already lost me the moment you chose to betray my trust. You let someone else into our relationship, and that's not something I can just overlook," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I need space to figure out what I want, what I need. You've put me in a position where I can't trust you anymore. Maybe we can go to counseling. I'll do anything to fix this," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I love you, Jake. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was just confused." I felt my resolve waver for just a moment. I wanted to believe her desperation, but I also knew that I couldn't make decisions based solely on her emotions. "Counseling might help, but it's not going to erase what happened. I need some time apart to think clearly without your influence hovering over me." "Please don't do this," she begged, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're all I have. I can't imagine my life without you." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "That's exactly why I need this space. I can't be your crutch anymore. I need to prioritize my own well-being." Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I watched her struggle with the reality of our situation, her face crumpling in despair. My heart ached for her, but I had to stay strong. I was doing this for me, even if it felt like ripping apart a part of my life I had built for so long. "Where will you go?" she finally asked, her voice soft and broken. "I'll figure that out. I might stay with Mike for a while," I admitted. "I just need to get away from here." Her reaction was immediate, a mix of anger and desperation. "You can't just run away. This is our home. You're leaving me to deal with this alone." "I'm not running away. I'm trying to heal," I replied, my voice steady. "You had your choices, and now I have mine." After a long pause, I continued, "I think it's best if you find a place to stay too. I don't want us to keep bumping into each other in this house, pretending like everything is okay. We need physical distance to sort through our feelings." "Jake, you're being unfair." She stood up, the anger boiling over. "You think I wanted this? I didn't want to hurt you. Maybe you didn't want to hurt me, but you did. You made a choice. You didn't think about how it would affect me or our life together," I said, feeling the anger bubbling up inside me. "You need to take responsibility for your actions, and I need to take responsibility for myself." She fell back onto the couch, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed. Seeing her in pain tugged at my heart, but I knew I couldn't let that sway me. This wasn't just about her feelings, it was about mine too. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but my decision is final. We need this space to understand how we truly feel and what we want moving forward." I let those words hang in the air, heavy with finality. Eventually, Sarah nodded, the fight leaving her as she recognized the truth in my words. "I'll give you space," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I hope you know I never wanted it to come to this." "I know," I replied softly, struggling to keep my own emotions at bay. "But it's where we are now, and we need to face it." With that, I turned and walked out, feeling the weight of my decision settle on my shoulders. It felt surreal, like I was living in someone else's story. I wasn't ready for the emotional roller coaster that lay ahead, but I was determined to find clarity. I wasn't just losing a wife, I was losing a part of my identity. I spent the next few days packing my things, moving to Mike's apartment. He was supportive, helping me process the whirlwind of emotions. I didn't have all the answers. I was still grappling with feelings of anger, sadness, and betrayal. But one thing was certain. I was committed to finding my path forward. As I settled into the new space, I made a pact with myself. I wouldn't rush into anything. I would take the time to reflect on what I wanted from my life, my future, and whether there was any possibility of reconciliation with Sarah. But for now, all I could do was put one foot in front of the other and begin the journey of healing. I needed to rediscover who I was outside of our relationship, someone who had been so lost in trying to make her happy that I had forgotten about my own happiness. It was time for me to reclaim my life. The first few days at Mike's felt disorienting. I was surrounded by familiar comforts, a couch I had spent countless hours on, the smell of his cooking wafting through the air, but it all felt foreign. I was navigating a world that had been turned upside down, and every corner I turned reminded me of Sarah. I missed her presence, but I certainly didn't miss the pain. Mike was a great friend, always willing to listen and offer some perspective. He had even suggested I start journaling to process my feelings. Initially, I thought it was a silly idea, but I figured it might help me sort through the chaos. So, I bought a simple notebook and started jotting down my thoughts. At first, it was just a stream of anger and confusion. I wrote about my heartbreak, the betrayal, and the hopeless feelings that gnawed at me. But as days turned into weeks, I noticed a shift in my writing. I began to reflect on my own needs, the things I had sacrificed for Sarah, and what my life could look like if I chose to put myself first for once. I also started to think about Sarah less as the person I had loved and more as a lesson in vulnerability and trust. I realized she was struggling too, though that didn't excuse her actions. I began questioning whether there were signs I had ignored, whether I could have been more attentive. Amidst this turmoil, I began to see a glimmer of hope. I started reconnecting with friends, diving into hobbies I had neglected over the years, and even picking up a few new interests, like joining a local gym. I felt stronger, more in control, and I started to understand the importance of self-love and self-care. But there were still moments when I missed Sarah intensely. Late at night, when silence enveloped the room, I would find myself dreaming of our past, of the better times we had shared. Those memories tugged at my heart, reminding me of the love that had once existed. It was a painful reminder, but it also became a catalyst for my healing. One evening, sitting on Mike's balcony, I reflected on everything that had happened. I thought about how far I had come since the day I walked in on Sarah and Mark. I was finally starting to find my footing again, even if the path ahead remained unclear. That weekend, I decided to reach out to Sarah. It felt like the right time to see where we both stood. I had been giving her space, but I was also aware that avoiding the conversation wouldn't help either of us heal. I felt a mix of anxiety and determination as I sent her a text, asking if we could meet for coffee. To my surprise, she responded quickly, agreeing to meet. I spent the next few days oscillating between excitement and dread. I had no idea how she had been coping or what changes she might have made. Part of me feared she might still be the same person who had betrayed me, while another part of me hoped that perhaps time apart had helped her gain some clarity. When the day arrived, I found myself packing outside the cafe, anxiety bubbling up within me. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. She was already seated at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. As soon as I saw her face, a wave of nostalgia washed over me, and I had to remind myself of the purpose of this meeting. "Hey," I said cautiously, sliding into the seat opposite her. "Hey," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a heaviness in the air, and I could feel the tension radiating from her. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, and I took the opportunity to observe her. She looked different. Her hair was styled more simply, and there were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there before. It was clear she hadn't been sleeping well, and my heart ached seeing her like this. "I've missed you," she finally said, breaking the silence. "I've missed us." I nodded, swallowing hard as I tried to keep my emotions in check. "I've missed you too, but I've also been trying to figure things out. I needed this time away." "Me too," she admitted, looking down at her cup. "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I realized how much I took you for granted." Those words echoed in my mind. "I appreciate you saying that, but it doesn't erase what happened. Trust is hard to rebuild, Sarah." "I know," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't realize how good we had it until I lost it. I've been seeing a therapist and I've been working on my issues. I know I messed up and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you." Hearing her acknowledge her mistakes felt grounding, but it also triggered a wave of anger. "Your apologies are valid, but they don't take away my hurt. You broke something that can't be easily fixed," I replied, my voice steady but firm. "I understand. I'm not expecting you to forgive me right away or even at all. I just wanted to come here and say that I'm sorry and that I'm committed to doing the work to be better," she said, her eyes filled with tears. I remained silent for a moment, absorbing her words. I had to remind myself that this meeting wasn't about rekindling our relationship, but rather about understanding where we both stood now. "Where do we go from here?" I asked, genuinely curious. "What do you want?" "I want us to be able to communicate openly. I want to rebuild what we had, but I know it's going to take time and effort. I'm willing to do whatever it takes," she said, her voice laced with sincerity. As I listened to her, I realized that I was no longer the same person I was before. I had spent weeks focusing on my own growth and healing, and now I was faced with a choice. I could either dive back into our relationship or continue to focus on myself. "I think we both have a lot of work to do individually before we can even consider what our relationship might look like," I said carefully. "I can't promise anything right now, but I'm open to seeing where things go. I still care about you, but it's going to take time." "I understand," she replied softly, a hint of relief washing over her expression. "I just wanted to be honest about where I stand." We ended our conversation on a hopeful note. I could see that Sarah was genuinely trying to change, and I respected her efforts. But as I left the cafe, I realized that this was just the beginning of a long journey. I had come to terms with the fact that we might never return to what we once had. But for the first time in a while, I felt a flicker of optimism about the future for both of us. As I walked away, I understood one thing very clearly. My healing journey was far from over, and while Sarah would always hold a piece of my heart, I was ready to forge my own path moving forward, however that might look. The days following the coffee meeting felt different. There was a tentative sense of hope lingering in the air, but I was also aware that hope alone wouldn't fix what had been broken. Sarah and I started communicating more, checking in with one another, but I was careful to keep my boundaries firm. I wasn't completely ready to welcome her back into my life. At the same time, I focused on my own journey. I continued to explore new interests, spending more time at the gym, and reconnecting with friends I had neglected over the years. I realized how much I had stifled my own desires and interests while trying to make our relationship work. It felt liberating to rediscover parts of myself I had forgotten. One evening, Mike and I went out for drinks. As I shared updates about my life post-separation, I felt lighter. "You know, I never thought I could find happiness without Sarah," I confessed. "But now I feel like I'm coming back to life." "That's awesome, man. It's all about you right now. You have to put yourself first," Mike replied, raising his glass in a toast. "To you and to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself adjusting to life on my own. I was still processing the pain of betrayal, but I also began to recognize the lessons it had taught me. I learned that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, but it's also a reminder of how resilient we can be when faced with adversity. With Sarah, our conversations became more honest and grounded. She was attending therapy regularly and had made significant progress in understanding her actions. I could see glimpses of the person I had fallen in love with, but I was also acutely aware that this wasn't the time to rush back into our old patterns. One day, Sarah reached out to me with an idea. "I've signed up for a couples workshop. I know we're not officially back together, but I thought it might help us understand each other better and see if we can rebuild trust." I considered her proposal carefully. "I'm open to it, but I want to make sure we're both doing this for the right reasons. We need to go into this with the mindset of healing, not just rekindling." She agreed, and we signed up for the workshop, each of us approaching it with cautious optimism. The sessions were intense but illuminating. We explored topics like communication, trust, and vulnerability, all while navigating the complexities of our relationship's history. It was challenging to relive the hurt, but it also provided a safe space for us to express our feelings. Through the process, I saw Sarah commit to her growth. She was honest about her fears and insecurities, and I, in turn, felt safe enough to share my own. We learned to listen to each other without judgment and began to rebuild the foundation of our relationship brick by brick. As the workshop progressed, I started to feel a shift within myself. I began to let go of some of the anger and resentment I had held onto for so long. I realized I couldn't control the past, but I could control how I responded to it. Forgiveness became a personal journey that was necessary for my own peace, regardless of whether we ended up together or not. At the end of the workshop, we had a final exercise where we wrote letters to each other. I poured my heart out, expressing my love for her, the pain of betrayal, and my hope for our future. I wrote about how I was still learning to trust and how I wanted to continue working on myself while exploring our dynamic. When the time came to read the letters aloud, I was surprised by how vulnerable I felt. I had spent so much time living in anger that revealing my softer side felt terrifying yet liberating. As Sarah read her letter, tears streamed down her face, and I could see the weight of her own burdens reflected in her eyes. "I'm so grateful for this chance to rebuild," she said, her voice shaky but filled with sincerity. "I know it will take time, but I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to show you how much you mean to me." "I appreciate that, Sarah. It means the world to me," I replied, feeling a knot in my throat. "But we have to take this slow. I want to build something solid, something real." As we left the workshop, I felt a sense of accomplishment. While we weren't rushing into anything, we had laid the groundwork for a more honest and authentic relationship. There would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about our future. Though I had no idea where this journey would ultimately lead, I knew one thing for certain. I was committed to my own growth, irrespective of the outcome. I had learned that self-love and healing were paramount, and that relationships, while they can be complicated, also offer opportunities for profound growth. In the end, I walked away from the experience not just with a clearer understanding of Sarah, but also a stronger sense of self. I was ready to face whatever came next, whether it was as partners or as individuals. I might have lost something I thought I could never regain, but in the process, I found a deeper understanding of who I was and what I wanted from life. As I stepped into the unknown, I embraced the journey ahead, knowing that no matter what, I would be okay.